This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever you are from. First of all, thank you so much for attending this online session on the complete DR solution for Oracle Standard Edition and Introduction to Dbvisit Standby by Vijayganesh Sivaprakasam. On behalf of Nepal Oracle User Group, I would like to thank Vijay for accepting this invitation to present this online session. Data is the oil, some say the gold of the 21st century. Data is the raw material that our economics, societies, and democracies are increasingly built on. So protecting data is the core mission and goal of every organization. Every database management system contains a lot of features and options to protect them from the disaster. In Oracle, we have DG, also called as Data Guard as DR solution. And I have found the Dbvisit perfect tool for the standard edition of Oracle database. And we have DJ to demonstrate them. In my past, while I was learning Dbvisit, I felt 7 days trial subscription is not sufficient. So I had requested a 30 days trial and Dbvisit provided it happily. So I have requested the Dbvisit team to provide 30 days trial access for all attendees in the webinar. So guys, we have a 30 days trial key with us and I will very soon paste it in the chat window. Please note them down and use them and learn Dbvisit. As usual, I would like to mention we have a lot of limitation in this webinar tool. So I humbly request everyone to stay mute until the end. You may raise your question via text in the chat section anytime. We will grab them and reply them as soon as possible. And I have requested for free Dbvisit online training and certification with Kelly, and told me that she told me that uh, to provide the list of the attendees who are interested in Dbvisit training, free Dbvisit online training and the certification. So anyone if interested with the free Dbvisit training, it's basically online training and the certification, then let us know and we will provide the free Dbvisit training and the certification. And lastly, I would like to request, please fill up the feedback form. It will help a lot. It will help a lot to us, and your feedback and comments are very valuable to us. So just uh, just fill up the feedback form. Thank you. I would like to hand over the control to BJ. BJ, you are ready, right? BJ?
Sorry, yes, Dilly, I'm ready.
Okay. I have hand over control to BJ, and BJ will introduce himself and start the session. Let's enjoy the session. All yours, BJ.
Oh, hello, everyone. My name is Vijayganesh Sivaprakasam, or you can call me as Vijay. So I'm working for Dbvisit for the past 3 years. So I'm the Director of Customer Services. So I take care of support, customer services, pre-sales, implementation services, and other projects related to support as well. So thanks for joining this session. It's a great pleasure and privilege to give you the demo and explain about our beautiful product that we have, or an extraordinary product that we have. So feel free to ask me any questions. Please, as Delhi suggested, you can paste it in the chat so that we can have a QA session in the end. And let's get started. Okay, Dbvisit Standby. This tool is nothing but it's a perfect DR solution for Oracle databases running in standard edition. And this is our agenda today. So first we'll talk about what is Dbvisit Standby, the components. So what is the architecture? What are the top features of Dbvisit Standby? What is automatic failover? What is the snapshot option? And we'll also see an extensive demo of how this Dbvisit product works, and how do we support, and what are the next steps as well. So this is me, and let's move on. What is Dbvisit Standby? It is a fast Oracle disaster recovery solution at a very low cost, because Oracle databases running in standard edition does not have data guard solutions. So Dbvisit decided to explore this option some 12 years ago, and then our founder Aryan started creating a small script, and then it developed into a company called as Dbvisit, and it is a full lifecycle DR for Oracle Standard Edition, and it's 100% cloud ready as well. So we are available. This Dbvisit can be installed in AWS, Oracle, Azure solutions, and it is also can be installed in hybrid as well. For example, you can have your primary in on-premise and standby in cloud as well. That's also possible. And tool is designed and supported by DBAs for the DBAs and their managers. That's because it's a very easy to configure solutions and easy to implement as well. And flexibility with more control for a central console, because you can manage multiple databases using a single central console, and that's another advantage of having Dbvisit Standby as well. Next is, what are the components? So before going into components, the Dbvisit is installed in both your primary and standby servers. So all these components are installed in your both primary and standby servers so that it can work. So your standby core is nothing but your command line interface. So that's a very key component of your Dbvisit Standby. So standby core must be installed in both your primary and standby. Next is your DBVNet. DBVNet is a network communication tool, and it provides secure communication between your primary and standby. For example, it helps in transferring of your RK logs generated in your primary database and it's to the standby database. That's a main, and then whatever the messages it gets from standby, to update it in the primary repository, DBVNet is used. DBV agent is mainly a gateway between your centralized console and standby core. So whatever the central console gives the command, the DBV agent executes these commands with the help of your standby core. Next is your DBV server, which is your web interface. And with this web interface, you can manage multiple primary standby pairs, and there are a variety of options available. And most of the time, you should be able to manage your primary and standby pair without even logging to the server. That's one of the greatest advantages of using central console. Next is your architecture. It's a very simple and a straightforward architecture. What we do is we have a primary site and a standby site. In my primary site, I have installed DBVNet, standby core, and DBV agent. And in a standby site, I have installed DBVNet, standby core, and DBV agent. And the central console is installed in a third server or a separate server. For example, if you have around 10 to 20 databases to manage, so it is easier to have a single central console through which you can manage all these 10 to 20 database pairs. Or if you have only a single pair of primary and standby, you can still have a small virtual machine for the central console, or Dbvisit recommends you to install your central console in the standby server. The reason behind this is, if your primary goes down, you should be still able to log into the central console and activate your standby database. So when it comes to architecture, for example, from your central console, if I say I'm going to send a log file from your primary to standby, what happens is the central console contacts the DBV agent, and the DBV agent, with help of your standby core, executes a command to transfer your log file from primary to standby, and that transfer is done using DBVNet. So once the log has been transferred from primary to standby, what I'm going to do now is, from central console, I again give a command to apply the log file. So what will happen here is, again, the command is being given to DBV agent, and with the help of your standby core, it executes the command. So it's as simple as that. And then the archlog is applied in your standby. This is the basic architecture of your Dbvisit standby. So from central console, I send a log file from so execute a command to send a log file or click a button to send a log file, and the DBV agent, with help of your standby core, executes the command, and the DBV net transfers the file from primary to standby. So this is your basic architecture of your Dbvisit. Next is network communication. So these are some of the ports that needs to be opened so that the Dbvisit can communicate. For example, the DBV net uses your port 7890, your agent uses port 7891, and your DBV server uses port 4433. So this is nothing but for a basic network communication. These are the ports that needs to be opened, and this is where these ports needs to be opened. So what are the top features of Dbvisit Standby? So we provide multi-languages support. For example, we have support of languages from English, French, German, Japanese, Chinese, Spanish. So these are the languages that we support. So variety of options that you have. For example, your primary can be an ASM, your standby can be a file system, your primary can be a rack node, and your standby can be a single instance. And it is also NFS compatible. And we also have a cascading standby. For example, from your standby database, you can create another standby database and then use it. So that's your cascading standby. And we can also open the database for read-only mode for reporting purposes. So some of the customers use this database, use a standby database, or they create a cascading standby database and then open the database in read-only mode so that they can use it for reporting purposes. But we have a new feature called a snapshot, which I'll talk about in detail, where you can use that snapshot feature for your reporting and your ETL jobs purposes as well. So next is monitor and manage configurations entirely through GUI. You don't have to use any of the command lines. You can entirely manage all the configuration without even logging into the server. And you can schedule your send and apply of archeologs from your primary to standby using a Dbvisit daemon. For example, it looks out for the archeologs in primary and then sends the archeologs from primary to standby. And then when the standby sees an archeolog in the daemon sees the archeolog in standby, it applies the archeolog there. So that's another advantage, so that you don't have to have any external cron scheduler or any other scheduler to send and apply archeologs. Another greatest advantage here is, for example, if you have no archeolog generation for a particular period of time, what happens here is the archeologs, so it does a lock switch in the primary and sends the archeologs from primary to standby and then applies that archeolog in standby, thereby making sure your standby is always in sync with your primary.
Vijay, one request. Can we maximize the presentation screen?
Yeah, the screen is in full screen mode actually.
Basically, the next slide option. Can you hide the next slide option that is showing on the
Okay,
right?
once again.
Okay.
Just a second. Oh, okay. I think I'm showing a different screen altogether. Just give me a minute.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you should be able to see the full screen.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you,
Sorry
Vijay.
about that. I had to change screens. Okay. Uh, so this is the architecture and then network communication. So these are the top features of your Dbvisit Standby. And the next thing is Graceful Switchover. It's completely it's a role reversal. For example, when you do a Graceful Switchover, there is zero data loss, wherein your primary becomes your standby and your standby becomes your primary database. The advantages, for example, let us say if you have a hardware maintenance in your primary, you can switch your database to your standby database and thereby continuing to serve your users. And once the hard maintenance is completed, you could apply the archeologs in your old primary and then switch it again so that it can become your new primary. It can come back to its original primary and standby. This is a very good feature. And then this avoids a lot of manual work that we do when we have when you have a standby, which is for your standard edition, wherein all this work has to be done manually, like transferring the online reader logs to the standby, transferring the control files to the standby, bringing up the database into read-write mode. So all these operations are done manually when it's a standard edition. But using Dbvisit tool, these operations are completely done automatically with a single click. And I'll show you this as well. And then there is a user quick guide wherein we provide step-by-step help for GUI components as well. And then there is another advantage is we have something called as support packages for faster problem resolution. So usually what happens is whenever a customer encounters an issue, we ask them to create a support package, which would generate all the files required for the support team from both primary and standby, thereby making sure that we don't have to go back and forth for the support, so that the engineer has all the files he needs for the faster resolution as well. That's a very good feature. And standby database activation. So what happens when during a DR testing scenario or during the main activation scenario, what you can do is you can do a read-only check so that it makes sure that the standby database is in consistent stage. And also a DR testing scenario, what happens is before, if you have a DR test that needs to be performed, for example, some of the companies or financial institutions have a regulation stating that you have to perform a DR test every 6 months to make sure that your DR is consistent or not. So what they do is instead of activating the database completely and then rebuilding your standby again, what we do is we back up your standby database prior to the activation. And then once your DR testing is completed, you could reinstate the standby database again after activation so that you don't have to recreate the entire standby from the primary, thereby occupying resource in the primary for taking backups and transferring the files from primary to standby. So these are avoided for these overheads are avoided when you are doing a DR test with Dbvisit Standby. And from version 9.0.2, we have an option called as automatic or manual failover. This is called as an observer. What happens is for certain scenarios, what we will do is an observer will be running in your both primary and standby, and it will be pinging your primary and standby. Whenever the primary goes down, it can automatically activate your standby database or send out an alert to the user stating that there's a issue happening in your primary, and then you need to activate your standby database. So that's your automatic failover. And another snapshot option. This is a very awesome feature. So I will talk about this feature in detail in the later slides. So this is the automatic failover. So it requires existing standby database, and it is managed through GUI, and the Dbvisit observer component has to be installed in your standby or the GUI component. And the default port for listening is 10853. So for example, let us say the observer will listen to both your standby cores of your primary and standby via centralized console. And whenever there is an issue, what will happen is it will help in activating these resources from your primary and standby, or it will activate your standby database if you have set for activation. This is your exciting Dbvisit standby option. So Dbvisit standby option is like it creates a replication of your standby database at a moment in time. So this is it's like an OS snapshot feature where it creates a particular snapshot from of your logical volume. And the snapshots are very fast and makes it easy, and it's very short term. And it also provides an up-to-date environment of your standby database. For example, if you have to run a quick report of your what you can do is you can create a snapshot from the standby database and then open it in read-only mode and then run a quick report. Or what you can do is you can also have open the standby database in create a snapshot in a read-write mode and then use it for your ETL runs or running some reports or running some workflows. This is a very good option. And then it uses a principle of copy and write technology underneath, meaning initially the snapshot will take almost zero space. So once you start adding data to your snapshot, it will occupy space, and this particular space that is occupied can also be restricted. For example, you don't need your snapshots to grow more than 10 GB or 15 GB. You can restrict that particular data increase as well in your snapshot. So snapshot by design are very short-lived, or the longer they stay, the more the storage it will occupy. So that's another feature of snapshot as well. So there are two options for snapshots. One is a snapshot group. So it creates an effect of a read-only database that's being updated. For example, let us say you have a snapshot can be created for a group can be created for more than two or three. The maximum allowed is 4. What happens is it usually uses a standby database to create a logical container, and then the database will be created at a particular point in a particular interval. For example, if you have given the interval as 15 minutes, every 15 minutes a new database will be created, and a listener will point to this particular new database and making it as a leader. So thereby making sure that the data is keeping updated from your primary, and then the latest data is available as snapshots in the standby as well. The maximum number of snapshots that can be created in a snapshot group is 4. So this is useful for customers that want and extract data from their environment, but also allow for the snapshots to be created in a rotating fashion. So thereby making sure they always have the latest information in their standby, and then they can use it to run reports. The sessions are not moved between the snapshots. So once the snapshot is destroyed or overwritten, the session is disconnected. So the longer the snapshot for example, if you have a snapshot interval of, let us say, 45 minutes to an hour, what will happen here is it will hold on a session for an hour. Once it is overwritten, the session will be disconnected, and the new sessions will start getting connected to the new snapshots. And then the single snapshot can be used for read-only or read-write purposes, mainly for development or testing environment. So usually from a DBA perspective, it is very useful because sometimes the development team might ask for a new database to be created from your production for doing some development testing. So the usual refresh procedure takes a lot of time. Probably they want to test a small fix. So by using a read-write snapshot, you could generate a snapshot which is created within few minutes, so that you can give the entry to the development team so that they can test their fixes as well. And you can also use it for application or upgrade testing, and then you can also use it for DR testing. For example, you can open this database in read-write mode, do a DR test to make sure everything is consistent, extract a report, or do some changes, and once it is done, you can easily destroy it. So thereby it is not it is not affecting your existing standby, and in the existing standby you're still syncing from the primary as well. These are the advantages of your snapshots. Now let's go to the interesting part of demo. So this is your central console. So first and foremost thing is, so what you have to do is this manage host. Okay, so I log into the central console. So the manage host is where I add your primary and standby host. So this contacts the DBV agent and then make sure that the host is up and running or not. My primary host is DBV1, and then it populates my standby host is DBV2. So if you see here, both your primary and standby hosts are up and running. So as soon as I add my host, so what will happen here is my next step is to create a DDC file. A DDC file is nothing but a Dbvisit database configuration file, where it's like a init.ora. So the DDC file will have information about your source database, your source server, source Oracle home, target server, target Oracle home, and where you are storing your archeologs in your target, and your email configurations, how you manage your archeologs in both primary and standby. And all those information are written into this configuration file. So let me create a small configuration as well. So I create a small configuration. So for this demo, I'm using a Docker environment with EL6, Enterprise Linux 6 with 11.2.04 database. So I'm choosing my primary host. So if you see here, it is manual. It is automatically populating the databases that is running in your primary. And so this is called as an arc source directory. This arc source directory is usually empty for the primary, and it is not the archeolog directory of the database. It's a completely different directory. So it is just at this point in time, this will not have any data inside it. It will just be empty. And then I'm choosing my standby. And another advantage here is if you don't want to use DBVNet, you can still use SSH for communication between primary and standby as well. So if you configure a passwordless SSH between primary and standby, you should be able to use SSH instead of DBVNet. Next is standby host. And then if you see here, the arc desk directory. So this is the location where the archeologs from primary are transferred into this directory. And from this directory, the archeologs are applied in the standby database. And then it asks for your standby Dbvisit base, your Oracle home directory, and your configuration. Now I'm just going to apply a license here so that I can. Okay, now the configuration has been created. The next step after creating a configuration is to create a standby database. So as a DBA now, we will appreciate how easy it is to create a standby database. So now I select the configuration. So as soon as I select my configuration, it is going to list me. It is going to ask me whether I have to create a new standby database or use a template or resume a particular standby database creation. So here I'm choosing a new standby database. The main advantages here, for example, so this is going to list all the init.ora parameters from the primary database. So the advantage here is, for example, if your primary is ASM and your standby is a file system, I should be able to change all the init.ora parameters here. For example, I can do a db create file des or a db file name convert, log file name convert. If I have to add a specific parameter, I could add a specific parameter in the standby. So all those things can be done in the central console itself. You don't have to go to the server and do anything other than the installation and starting off of your components. You don't have to do anything in the server. Everything could be done from your central console itself. So it is listing all the parameters of your primary database, which will be used for your standby database. If there are any changes that needs to be done here, I can do those changes as well. So there are two options here. The one option is if you want to perform your backup, transfer, and restore operations in parallel. So this is a very new feature for version 9. So for example, if you have a database which is around 100 GB, so what happens here is you don't have to wait for the backup to complete and then the file transfer from primary to standby start. What will happen is as soon as your first file backup is completed in the primary and the second file starts, it will start transferring the first file from primary to standby. As soon as the first file is transferred and then it starts to transfer the second file, what will happen is the restore operations in the standby will start as well, thereby reducing a lot of time between file transfer and restore, which is not possible when you manually do a standby database creation. For example, in a manual process, you take a backup, you transfer all those files, and then you start this process. But Dbvisit, what happens is it will do this automatically, making sure that the database is available faster to the customers. And another thing is transportable media. Transportable media is also a beautiful option. For example, if you have a database which is more than a terabyte or 500 GB, So if you have an NFS drive, what you can do is you can have your primary database backup created in an NFS drive if you enable the transportable media. For example, if I enable the transportable media, what will happen is I will take the backup to the NFS drive or an external media. Once the backup is completed, what will happen is it will pause. And then what I'll do is I will disconnect and attach the NFS drive to your standby server. And once it is done, I could just resume the standby database creation. And then the standby database creation will resume from that NFS drive. So thereby eliminating the complete step of transferring the files from primary to standby. The only time it takes is to backup and the restore operation. So right now we are not doing a transportable media. We'll just stick to parallel operation. So on source and target location. So this is the location where your backups will fall in the primary, and then it is transferred to the standby, and then that's a target location is where the backup is going to fall. So right now I'm using just user temp. So if you can see here, so it does not take more than 5 minutes for us to start a standby database creation. So my database is a very small database, so it's not going to take much time. But even for a larger database, the preparation time is not that much when it comes to Dbvisit Standby. So if it's in a normal process, you have to go to your primary and standby, log into the servers, and there is a lot of time and effort it takes. But with Dbvisit Standby, it's very simple and straightforward. So during your standby creation, what happens is it first does a pre-flight check before even it creates a standby database. It's just a pre-flight check to make sure that your standby is ready for standby creation or not. So it just creates an instance and then shuts it down, and then it checks for whether the instance is properly created or not, and then it proceeds with your actual instance creation. So this is going to take a few minutes. So do you have any questions? Perfect. Let's wait for it. And another important thing is, as I said, this standby can be this is completely cloud supported, and we are supporting in AWS, Azure, Oracle Cloud, and also hybrid configurations. For example, you can have your primary in on-premise data center and your standby in an AWS cloud. And we are also compatible with ODA as well. But when it comes to ODA, the storage has to be created, and then you proceed with your installation and creation of your standby database. So if you see here, we didn't see the files being transferred because the files got transferred parallelly as soon as it's completed. So the restore process has already started before the last file was completed. So that's the advantage of having a parallel transfer as well. So if you do this manually, it takes a lot of time and effort, because you have to make sure that the restore is completed. You have to monitor every time logging into the server. But with the central console at Dbvisit, you should be able to do it with the central console itself.
Vijay, we have a few questions from the attendees.
Sure. Does it support enterprise edition or only? So usually we don't recommend customers running our software in enterprise edition, because data guard is always there, and we cannot provide a zero data loss with standard edition. So with enterprise edition, Oracle guarantees zero data loss with data guard. And okay, so the agent is transferred to targeted system automatically. So the installation has to be done on both your primary and standby. And so you install your DBVnet, DBV agent, and your standby core in both primary and standby. And a DBV server, if you have no options of a third server, you install in standby. And So the prerequisite is the binary has to be installed in the standby server. Okay,
Yeah,
so yeah.
it's basically transferring binaries, libraries, and making them running on the both the machines, right?
No,
Installing.
so in the installation, the Oracle installation has to be done as it's a
Mhm.
prerequisite that you have to do the Oracle installation before you install your standby.
Okay,
So we don't do the Oracle installation. The Dbvisit product does not do the Oracle installation. We just create the standby database for you.
thank you.
And so the transfer happens using DBVNet. DBVNet is a secure mode of transfer. And then what is the mode of transfer? Okay, so so when it comes to data reliability in standby, if I understand it correctly, what happens here is if for example, if there is during the transfer, if there is a network corruption between your primary and standby, we have a parameter called as a compare checksum. So what happens is every time it transfers an archelog from primary to standby, it makes sure that the checksum is matched between primary and standby before applying it on the standby. And if the archelog is corrupted in the standby, it will not even apply those archelogs as well. And actual data reliability is absolutely whatever is there in the database, it is transferred to the archelogs via the redo log switch. So it is always there in the standby. Okay, so the standby is created now. The next option is how do I send and apply archelogs? Sorry, I cannot hear you properly. Hello?
Vijay, I guess someone has accidentally unmuted himself or
Okay.
herself.
No worries. Okay,
Please.
fine. So the next step is how do I send and apply archelogs? So as an example, I'll just show you. So in database actions, we have multiple options here to send archelogs on primary to standby. As I said earlier, if there are no archelogs generated in the primary, what happens is we do a log switch in the primary and then make sure we transfer that file from primary to standby. And this can be done automatically as well. So if I enable this daemon process, what will happen is the daemon is going to check for archelogs in primary. And then whenever it sees an archelog, it's going to transfer that archelog from primary to standby. And standby will also monitor for any new archelogs from primary. And then as soon as it sees the archelog, it is going to apply that particular archelog, thereby making sure the standby and primary are in sync. And you can also have a log gap report here, where it shows that what is the log gap between primary and standby as well. And you can manage all your database actions from here. For example, let us say if you have to restart your primary database, stop your primary database, and then if you have to start your standby database in read-only mode, everything can be done from Central Console itself. You don't have to log into the server at all. And then if you have to send a particular log file, refresh a particular data file. And this is we also have a time gap information where it's a graph which shows what is the time gap between primary and standby, and it also shows when the archelog was applied and how long before the archelog was applied from standby to primary. So these are database actions. And next is I can show you a graceful switchover as well. So graceful switchover, as I said, is like it's an option where your primary becomes your standby database and standby becomes your primary database. So if you see here, all these operations are performed with fewer clicks, thereby it also makes sure that before you do your graceful switchover, it also makes sure that your standby is in sync with the primary, so that there is no log gap between your primary and standby as well. And it also makes sure that there are no observers or snapshots or anything that is going to hinder your switchover process. So when you do a graceful switchover, what happens? It runs a pre-check, and then before even doing the graceful switchover. And another greatest advantage of graceful switchover is, so if there is an issue in the middle of the graceful switchover before a particular point in time where it is not reversible, what happens here is the rollback app operation automatically happens using Dbvisit, and then if there is an issue, it's going to roll back into your original primary and standby if there is any issue in your standby or primary. So that option is also available. So since my database is small, it's going to take very less time. But in actual scenarios, it may take a little bit more time than that. And another important aspect during graceful switchover is the database is bounced a couple of times, both your primary and standby. So there a downtime is involved because a graceful switchover has to be done in a scheduled downtime where the primary becomes a standby and the standby becomes the primary. So if you see here, the graceful switchover is completed now. And if you look at the database actions here, if you can see that the host is also switched. If you see here, the DBV2 has become the primary and the DBV1 has become the standby. And you could start sending and applying archlogs from here itself directly. You don't have to do any changes in your configuration file or any other changes that needs to be done other than your application changes, where application will point to the new primary server. But from Dbvisit perspective, you just have to start the daemon process so that it will start sending and applying archlogs in both primary and standby. That's the greatest advantage of this. And let me show you a demo of our snapshots. So for example, this is our snapshot group. So if you see here, I have an existing snapshot which is running because it would save time, because unless or else we'll have to wait for a couple of minutes to see the actual impact of snapshot group. So if you see here, I have three a snapshot group which has three snapshots running. My snapshot name is test001 and this is the leader. So for example, where a leader is where all your user connections will go to. So after 10 minutes, what will happen is the test001 will fail over to the leader will be transferred to another group, and the oldest one, for example, the oldest one is test003, and the test003 will be removed, and then it will automatically create another snapshot, and then the leader will be moved to the latest snapshot. So the interval for creation is 600 seconds. Every 10 minutes, I'm creating a snapshot. And if you see the size of the snapshot is 1.73 GB. And there are certain prerequisites before you can have your snapshots enabled. For example, the standby database has to be in a single logical volume, and you need to make sure that you have additional memories, and the logical volume has enough free spaces for the snapshots to grow. And let me show you the server. For example, this is my standby server. If you see here, I have my snapshots. I have three snapshots running, a snapshot group with three snapshots running. So what happens, a fourth snapshot is created here because before switching over to before the old snapshot gets deleted, the new snapshot is created before it's deleted. So they were making sure that consistency of three snapshots is always maintained so that the users can access these three snapshots. And if you see the status of your listener as well, you can see that there is a service called as a test, which is servicing all these instances. And as I said, this snapshot is not going to occupy any space in your database. unless until you start writing to the particular snapshot. Let me create a single snapshot in read-write mode and show you. For example, I will say I can open the snapshot in read-write mode, and then it can provide a SGA value and the max size for the snapshot as well. This is a very cool feature, and as I said earlier, for example, during year-end or any month-end operations, usually what happens is the application team or the business team would want to run your month-end reports or your week or year-end reports on a specific time frame. For example, let us say as of 30th of every month, they wanted to run a report. So what happens is, instead of running these reports in a primary database or in a standby read-only database, you could create a snapshot and then ask them to run these reports. The advantage here is, while the reports are still running, your standby is still syncing with your primary, and there is no load on your primary database by running these reports. Thereby, users are complaining that they're not able to log in, or they're seeing slowness in your primary. And making sure that you don't, if your standby database is in read-only mode, you cannot recover that particular standby database, and thereby there is a gap is increasing as well. For example, if your month-end report would run for 6 hours, there will be a 6 hours gap between your standby and primary till it's converted into recovery mode. By using the single snapshot at a particular point in time, if you create, the creation time hardly takes a couple of minutes, and then you have a database in which you could run all the reports you want. You can even keep it for a day, and then you can run all the reports for this particular point in time, and thereby making sure that you don't impact any of your primary or standby database. So this is a huge advantage for people who have ETL processes running or any workflow processes running. For example, you can create a standby database, snapshot standby database in read-write mode, and then you can create a workflow. So usually these workflows creates temporary tables. So all these temporary tables can be created in a read-write snapshot, thereby, and then create multiple workflows, and then use the one which we need. So the one live example which I could give is, if you have heard about Axiom. Axiom is a financial software where they create multiple workflows, and then each workflow creates around 200 temporary tables. So, and then once that workflow use is done, it automatically gets dropped or deleted. So you delete all those 200 tables in your primary. The advantage here is, if you run that in primary, it's going to take your resources, it's going to take a lot of your space, it's going to create a lot of archeologs, it's going to make sure that application itself is slow for each and every workflow run. But if you run it in a snapshot standby, nothing of that sort of happens, and the data, actual data, live data, which is available in the standby itself, is used by Snapshot, and it is easier for you to extract your workflows and then do it. And for regulatory reporting purposes, this can be a very good data. For example, we used to run a quarterly report for a regulatory reporting. Let us say it takes around a couple of days or 2 days, but we always run it from a specific point in time, as of Jan 30th, as of February 28th, or as of March 31st. So if you are able to create a snapshot on that particular point in time, you should be able to have the snapshot for a while, and then run all those reports and submit without even impacting your primary and standby databases. That's a huge advantage. If you see here, I have an OUG running, and then let me log into this. If you see here, and then you can also see the instance running. Yes, that's a very good question. Snapshots are refreshable. That's the idea behind having a snapshot group. So what happens? It goes in a round robin fashion, wherein you can have new snapshots every 10 minutes, and the data is refreshed from standby as well with the new snapshot. And the new snapshot will become the leader with the latest data, and then you can use that snapshot for extracting the data as well. Okay, so when it comes to another thing is another question is how much performance is impact when using agent in DBV server. Okay, so this is different from OEM because agent has a very small footprint. Actually, it has a very small footprint. The repository, so all this agent, your DDC file has repository which is outside of your database. If you talk about OEM tool, the repository is inside the database as well. So the repository is completely outside the database, and it's a small SQLite repository, and the footprint is very, very less. So with Linux and Windows, we have never seen users complaining, customers complaining about performance issues when it comes to DBV agent, because the only activity that the agent does it translates whatever central console does to the standby core, and standby core executes the command. So other than that, agent does not do anything other than that. And the data is not a critical data. You can delete, you can reinstall the repository again, and all those things can be done without even having any impact on your primary and standby databases. Okay, so this is your snapshot group, and then so if you see here, there's now that's only 3. So if you see here, there is a 4th snapshot which was created, but as soon as the creation is completed, the oldest snapshot will automatically get deleted, and then the leader will become the latest snapshot which was created latest. See, this is the latest snapshot that was created. You have any other questions? If you have time, I can also show you I can show you the DR testing as well.
I think we have time, so Vijay,
Sure.
please go.
Yeah, so this disaster recovery actions is so okay, one more thing before I forget. So the environment that I used for Snapshot is AWS. So I had 2 EC2 instances configured, and I had already had a standby database created, because so that it is easier for me to show you the information. That's the reason I had to switch screens for showing you the snapshots. So disaster, this is a very awesome feature with version 9 as well. So for example, if I'm having a disaster recovery actions here, I can perform a DR test here. So what happens is there are 3 options here. One is activate now. For example, in case of emergency situations, you don't have time to take backup. So what we'll do is you'll just activate the standby database now, and then it opens the database in reset log mode, and then once everything is, if your primary is backup, you have to recreate a standby database from scratch. And another thing is perform DR test is a cool feature. For example, if you have a scheduled DR test happening, let us say from 6 hours from now or tomorrow, and if your standby database backup takes, if your actual backup takes, for example, 4 hours for the backup to complete, what you can do is you can start the perform the DR test, and then you can say run DR test, and then I can take a backup of my database. So here it says I can have I can either take an image copy or a backup set. Let us say I'm taking a backup set, and then I can provide a backup location as well. Let us say I'm providing a backup location as user tab. And then here is a very important option. Here it says, do you want to stop after the backup is completed? Thereby making sure that it is not activated as soon as the backup is completed. This is a very cool feature because if you're having a DR test happening tomorrow, you could take a backup today itself and then keep your database ready for activation. So it is backing up my standby database now. And coming back to question from Girija Bhushan, so as I said, the snapshots are refreshable, but the single snapshot can be recreated at any point in time. For example, if you want a single snapshot to be created for tomorrow, you could create a snapshot for tomorrow, and then you can destroy it at any point in time. The snapshot group itself, it gives you the latest data based on the services that is running, and then you can have snapshot group up to 4 so that it can keep rotating the snapshots with the latest information from the standby. So thereby it is refreshable, but refreshable not in a true sense, because once the particular snapshot becomes old, it is removed from the group and then a new fresh snapshot is created. So any connections that is there in the old group will be terminated. So that's the reason if if you're going to have a snapshot group, it is better to have it at a much larger interval than a small interval. So we usually say you can create a snapshot group with 5-minute interval, but that is always not recommended, because even if you run a small report, it's going to take at least 10 to 15 minutes. So what we can do is you can have a snapshot group created, for example, let us say 4 hours or 3 hours interval. Thereby what happens is whatever reports that are running on the particular session will complete within 2 or 3 hours, and then as soon as the connection is switched, whatever comes in new will be connecting to the latest snapshot. So thereby making sure it gets the latest data as well, so that the continuous reporting is done. So backup is completed. Now I say resume DR test. So now what's happening is, after the backup is taken, the DR database is going to get activated. That is, it's going to be opened in read-write mode with reset logs. See, if you see here, the database is activated now. And then let me go to the disaster recovery actions again. And then click on. So here it says reinstate. So once you click reinstate, what's going to happen is it's going to list me what are the backups that I've taken before the activation happened. If you see here, it shows me the backup. And then it's going to restore these backups back to the standby database and then open the database in mount mode for recovery purposes. This is a very good feature, because certain times what happens is there are certain regulatory requirements or financial requirements for certain companies. What they do is they will be compelled to do a DR test and then run few things from your DR and then destroy it and then recreate a DR. So that's going to take a lot of time. By using this DR test feature in Dbvisit Standby, you will be able to half the time by making reinstation possible. Yeah, in actual scenarios, so question from Praveen, if it is opening in read-write mode with reset logs, then after switch back, we need to rebuild. No. So what happens is the backup that is being taken before the activation is restored, and the database is opened in mount mode to continue recovery from your primary database. The activated standby database is destroyed completely, and then this restore happens in the background. So you don't have so there's no manual work involved here. If you think about it in an actual sense, even if I take a backup, what will I have to do? I have to shut down the database, remove all the files manually, start the restore, then do the recovery, and then start shipping from primary to standby. So all these operations are performed in a single step using Dbvisit Standby. See, if you see here, the standby database is reintegrated. If I go to the database actions now, I should be able to still send and apply RK logs here. So if you see here, I'm still able to. Yes, Dbvisit is officially supported by Oracle. We are all very good partners, or we are gold partners for Oracle. And then Oracle loves us a lot, hopefully. And we have been in the market for almost 12 to 13 years. No. So another question is, does Dbvisit provide zero data loss solution? So zero data loss is it's not possible with standard edition. So we don't commit on zero data loss solution because we cannot apply online data logs. We can apply only RK logs. So there is always a gap. So usually the gap is so on a very good network, very good system scenarios, the gap is always less than 5 minutes. If in case of activation, because already the last the RK log would have been applied in the standby, and then what happens if there is a crash in the primary, it can be opened till the last RK log. So as you can see here, I can still work with this, and then your log gap is 0 between primary and standby. Okay, so probable license cost or comparable difference between Oracle Database Enterprise Edition Data Guard. I think that's a question for Kelly. Kelly, can you answer that?
Hi guys. Okay, Kelly here from Dbvisit. So I'm the territory manager from Dbvisit, just here in case there's any questions like this. It really depends on like the type of licensing. Our licensing is per database, so it's a little hard to directly compare. Whereas, as you'll be aware, Oracle's licensing is per socket. Yeah. So, but you know, a comparable setup, we've done calculations in the past where we've come out at around 15% of the cost of DataGuard. Obviously, if you're using Dbvisit, you also need standard edition licensing, so that needs to be factored in as well. But yeah, just to give you an idea of the cost of Dbvisit, which is likely what you're getting at, you're looking at around $8,000 for a perpetual license, including first year support. And then we also offer term licensing, and that's around just under $4,000 per year. Okay, back to you, Vijay. Oh, so we don't license per core, we license per database. So the way it works, I've actually got a couple of slides if you wanted me to show them, or I can share them with Dilly to share with the group following the call. But basically we license per database. So most customers we find have one database, one production database. Both the production database and the standby database need to be licensed. So you generally purchase 2 database licenses. I'll send Vijay those slides and he can just share them.
Kelly, we have another question from one of the attendees.
Yes, no problem.
Yep.
In standby snapshot, is there any size and time limits? So the size would depend on what is the size of your what is the size that you want to go for your snapshots. For example, let us say, what is the amount of logical volume free space left in your logical volume as well. So it completely depends on you, but usually the snapshots is all short term. Actually, it's not for long-term solution. For example, you could run it for a couple of days, but we would not recommend running more than that. And there is no time limit, but what happens is this snapshot would obviously become older. The groups will stay as it is, but as the group size will increase because your database size increases after applying archelogs in your standby. So that's the reason we would say that you could run it for a couple of days, but you could always stop and restart the standby refreshes, so that making sure that you can have sufficient space and resources. So this is the license. This is the standby pricing.
Yeah, so just if I talk you through it, it's $3,300 per database. You'll always have 2 database licenses because you've got your production and standby database, which gives you $6,600, and then that's for a perpetual license. And then your 1-year support, which is 25% of the license cost, and that's how we get our basic just over $8,000. Most customers we find have that this sort of setup. And then if you just go to the next slide there, VJ. This is the snapshot pricing. So snapshots in an optional add-on. And that one is, so you have your standby licensing, and then if you want to have snapshot running, say, off your standby database, it's an additional $49.50 plus support. And then if you just go to the next slide, VJ. This is our term pricing. So for standby, it's $19.80 per database. Again, remember you need 2 database licenses at minimum. So you're looking at just under $4,000 US per year for term licensing. And of course, if you have more than one database you wish to protect, or you know, then we can definitely look into quantity discounts at that point, and that's something that we would work with you on. But yeah, it's purely per database, and we just did that because it makes it really simple. If you're replicating to the cloud, we don't have to worry about counting, you know, CPUs and CPU cores and so on in the cloud, which can be a little bit complex. So it just means we're purely worried about the databases. Another question that often comes up is if you're running rack, say you're running rack to single instance, so you've got 2 nodes. If it's just one database but it's multiple instance, that's only licensed as one database.
Perfect. Thanks, Kelly. Thank you very much. So next steps. So we have provided, as Dilly said, we have provided a 30-day license key for you to use. So we would encourage you to download our software and then play with it. It does not take much time and effort to configure our software at all. It's a very easy and straightforward. And then our user guide has all the information. And then we also have a lot of videos outside in YouTube for you to do installation. And if you don't have time, you could always use take our 2 hours test drive from the website, where it will give you a 2-hour time to go through our environment in an AWS environment. You could log in, you could create your standby, you could send apply logs, you could do Graceful Switchover, you could do Failover, and all those things can be done online itself. And then Q&A. So our website is dbvisit.com. You can see our blogs, subscribe to our blogs, and then that's our support website. And then for any inquiries, you can contact our territory manager, Kelly, and then her contact is available in the website as well. So thanks, Dilly. Thanks, Roman. That's it from my side. Do you have any other questions or anything?
Okay, I think there is no questions left.
Perfect.
And
Thank you very much. And then, so I'll also give my email ID if you want to contact me. So that's my email ID I have provided in the chat.
guys, am I audible?
Yes, Terry, yes.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that first of all, I would like to thank you, BJ, for this wonderful session. We learned a lot about the Dbvisit. And guys, if you are interested in that free online courses and the certification from the Dbvisit, just drop an email to info@nepalog.com. We'll try to arrange free certification and free courses for all the attendees in this webinar. Okay, thank you so much for attending this session. Please fill up the feedback form so that we get a proper information about the sessions and all this stuff. Thank you, Vijay, and thank you everyone for attending this session.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you very much.
Good day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Vijay. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.